Let's talk about causal inference techniques. And this is going to be an advanced topic, so consider this a very brief and casual TikTok version for causal inference. So the goal of causal inference is typically to calculate the impact of some treatment or program on some outcome. So we can use an example, let's say the impact of tutoring on grades. So our current gold standard for causal inference right now is a randomized experiment. And the key benefit for randomized experiments is any sort of confounder is evenly distributed between treatment and control. And confounders are pretty much anything that's impacting either the outcome variable or the decision to even participate in the treatment. So what ends up happening is you're going to have two groups. They're going to have, because of randomization, you have similar, say, demographics. It can be, say, they're also going to be similar temporal factors. For example, COVID, for example, like the treatment and control, they were randomized into these two groups, and then the treatment participated in tutoring. Time goes along, boom, there's COVID, all the school is now remote/online. That's already going to have an impact on grades, but in our experiment, that's going to impact both the treatment and the control, this whole COVID and remote learning ordeal. So there are times where we can't run the experiments because of policy, ethics, or we want to use historical data, for example, rather than spending all our resources building out a new experiment. So the key question with causal inference techniques is how to approximate this gold standard. So how do we approximate an experiment? Now we have longer videos on the topics that I'll mention, but this is going to be a very high level version of it. So this first technique is going to be propensity score matching. Basic idea is we're going to match treated with untreated along similar, let's say, confounders, demographics, and ultimately likelihood of receiving the treatment. So again, it's not a real experiment. What we do is we see a bunch of folks that did get the treatment, and we're going to try to match them with untreated folks to act as sort of a pseudo-control. And the nice thing about the pseudo-control is we're going to match along folks that have similar demographics, confounders, and likelihood of receiving treatment. So the next technique we'll talk about is called differences in differences. And we're going to first, we're going to find an untreated group with similar trends, outcome trends, before the treatment period. And we're going to look at two differences, hence difference in difference. We're going to look at before versus after. So before treatment versus after treatment. And then we're also going to look at the treatment group versus the untreated group. And the nice thing about this technique is we can also consider any sort of temporal factors, temporal changes, temporal impact that it might have had on our outcome variable. Hence, we have this untreated group that would also have that impact as well. So we subtract out the impact from these external factors by subtracting out the untreated group. Again, we have a longer video elsewhere. Finally, last technique we'll talk about is regression discontinuity. And the idea behind regression discontinuity is there's some threshold that triggers the treatment. And hence the threshold is sort of this discontinuity, where boom, all of a sudden the treatment happens. So let's imagine in our example where we're looking at tutoring on grades. let's say SAT score of 500, these folks get sent to tutoring. So with regression discontinuity, we're saying folks right above and right below the threshold. So scoring right above or right below the threshold is random. So in our case for this SAT score, we're saying 490 versus say 510 on the SAT is a bit random, actually. It could just be one question off. So the folks right below versus right above, they're actually quite similar. The only difference is by scoring right above, they get triggered the treatment, which in this case, they're sent to the tutoring program. Hence, we can actually compare the folks right below versus the folks right above getting the treatment program, getting the tutoring to evaluate the impact of tutoring.